All right, excellent. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody and appreciate everybody's time. Just to highlight, what we're going to talk about is how we help customers, really go after their data retention costs for mission critical apps on AWS. The focus of the presentation is really around very much largely around data protection. Just to highlight, and I'm Steve Siegel. I head up product marketing for Clumio. So let's talk about get started on talking about some of the challenges that customers face in what we call an all-cloud world. It's not just even multi-cloud. It's private cloud, public cloud, SaaS, multiple public clouds, certainly. But from the point of view of data protection, right, there are these sets of challenges that are in particular inhibiting people trying to get their mission critical applications into the cloud. So data vulnerabilities, exposure to data loss or ransomware, hidden costs, very significant costs from the point of view of long-term data retention. We'll get into the details of that in a moment. Restoration complexity, it really is pretty difficult to, after you've backed up and protected all your data, when you actually go through the process of trying to recover that data, there's a lot of complexity there, a lot of steps, a lot of opportunity for manual error. And then certainly the complexity of managing infrastructure. There's a lot of backup vendors out there who still have hardware and software stacks that the end customer needs to manage. And then from a Clumio point of view, we came out of stealth at the end of last year, so we understand a lot of folks don't quite know us yet. But our focus is data protection for an all-cloud world. We are what we call authentic SaaS. And in particular, we know that means not unlike people are used to in their everyday life with Uber and Lyft or OpenTable, right? The solution has to be very easy to manage, provide predictable costs. You don't get into a ride share when you can. I'm in an area that's still under lockdown, but when you could get into a ride share, you knew what the cost was going to be. It's the same with us. We scale on demand because we're built in the cloud. We use all the latest up-to-date technologies. We're built on AWS, so we take advantage of things like Lambda. And we provide always-on security and compliance because at the end of the day, it's data protection. Nobody can afford to take any risks with their data. So we support public cloud, private cloud, and SaaS data sources today, covering AWS, Microsoft 365, 365 and VMware. And we also have had a significant focus on compliance with our SOC 2 ISO compliance, SOC 2 type 1 compliance. We're getting very close on our type 2. And we also have HIPAA compliance and PCI compliance that we just recently qualified for. We think it's very rare in a company of our age and maturity, but it just speaks to the fact of how important we think data protection is, not only to us and our management, but more importantly, even to our customers. So with that, let's click down on some of the details of these sets of challenges, really kind of corroborating data, if you will, from Flexera that shows, if you look at what are the things that are holding companies back in their public cloud adoption, it comes down to core data protection issues around security, governance, and compliance, cost issues, managing cloud spend, and that sort of thing, and then complexity, not only in managing infrastructure, but complexity from the point of view of managing data recovery. So let's click down further and talk about some of the business requirements for full data protection. And a lot of this has been evolved in the on-prem world literally over decades. So, the first and foremost requirement, operational recovery, protect data from accidental deletions and mistakes and that sort of thing. Typically that's done in an on-prem world and erase snapshots at a data recovery level. And I'm an alumni, so you have folks in the in the data recovery and backup, from EMC or Dell EMC today, providing all of their stacks and levels of infrastructure to help you recover from data loss, from ransomware attacks and that sort of thing. And then you have other vendors who provide either through the cloud or through as interesting as it may seem to believe, Iron Mountain truck rolls, managing backups and tapes and that kind of thing. And that technology, it's evolved again over decades. And it's still out there, but there's a lot of cost and complexity that you have to deal with in managing the solutions. And particularly when you get to the cloud, these things have some really significant challenges. But let's talk about the cloud environment, right? And look at the particular data protection strategies that most customers have to go work with if they're already in the cloud, from the point of view of, building or, implementing AWS types of applications. Typically, the main strategy is around snapshots, and they work pretty well from an operational recovery point of view, but customers have to deal with complex scripting to manage the snapshots and the retention times because there are limits. There's up to 35 days retention for snapshots. When you get to data recovery and in any given account, there's a limitation of 100 copies in snapshots. But here's where things start to get particularly complex and certainly costly. If you talk about the exposure to ransomware and data loss, you've got to do complex scripting. You've got to create multiple accounts and put copies out there. And the cost of copies is typically 2 times that of S3, 5 times that for RDS of managing those copies. And again, there are limitations, so there's cost and complexity to deal with. And then if you take that to the extreme, right, which is not extreme, if you will, for healthcare companies who have to manage 7 years of data retention and whatnot. The point being is that 35-day limitation doesn't take you very far, and you have a lot of challenges to go ahead and go deal with. Now, in addition to that, AWS, rightly so, has their shared responsibility model. And the net of it is they provide the capabilities and those in-account snapshots for operational recovery. But from a true data recovery point of view and an extended retention point of view, it very clearly is called out in their shared responsibility requirements that the elements of that you need for an air gap backup, rolling backup, the ability to recover from data loss and ransomware, or extended retention and that kind of thing. That is ultimately the customer's responsibility. A lot of what we see is people employing snapshot managers today to do this. But again, there's complexity issues and cost challenges associated with that as an approach. And so Clumio has really taken a different type of an approach here for data protection. We're basically a single enterprise backup as a service that is secure. We deliver on always-on security. We provide end-to-end encryption, storage behind an air gap. The storage is within AWS. It's in S3, but it's in storage that Clumio manages. And within that, we provide end-to-end encryption, adherence to a specific policy that the customer defines. So all the things that you would expect in always-on security. The policy management, you can protect all of your workloads with a single well-defined policy. You could do multiples if you'd like, as many as you need. It takes about 15 minutes to put them in place. We provide cost-effective compliance, 1, because we have the policies, 2, because they're very simple and easy to implement. And then finally, and also importantly, we provide predictable costs. If you're in a VMware environment, we protect data and price by the VM. And for other workloads like AWS, EBS, and RDS, we charge by protected terabytes with long-term retention, but we don't charge by consumption. So all of that work that you would have to do to estimate your costs for compression, dedupe, change rates, et cetera, growth rates, et cetera, you don't have to worry about any of that. You just have to know how much data you want to protect and how long you want to protect it for. And then further to that, with our support that we just announced recently for RDS, with all of this, we can provide data recovery from the point of view of, we provide a global index so the data is searchable, but for RDS, we provide particularly faster data recovery and database restores because we can provide granular record recovery and the ability to provide rolling backup, so we can actually have a delayed backup and restore an RDS database if something got compromised. And so one of the other key elements here, and what I'm showing you here is actually a query builder. When we back up the data, we back up the snapshots, what we wind up doing is creating a logical backup that is actually searchable. So what you see on the left of the image here is you see different databases, you see the different tables, you can create a query, right? And then preview the records and then initiate a record retrieval, and literally it takes minutes. And what you can do is basically search your data. You can then export it to a CSV file that you might need to use for legal hold or e-discovery and that sort of thing. But notice the key difference. There was no building of restoring of snapshots, rehydrating them, rebuilding a system, mounting the snapshots, or creating a volume and then mounting the volume and all that kind of thing. Things that take weeks in an on-prem world, days, even in the cloud world today, with us literally take minutes, and there are a lot fewer steps and a lot more error-free. So just to give a quick example, one of our customers, being in the cloud, people ask us about our performance a lot. We have a customer here, a state-run public utility. With their previous solution, they were experiencing backup success rates in the mid-70s. With us, they experience almost 96% success rate. They've significantly saved on their backup team a lot of productivity, 400 person hours a year. But most importantly, and it's supported by the quote that the CTO gave us, from the point of view of we did a proof of concept with them where we scaled from 30 VMs, and literally we were scaling to over 2,000 VMs in a couple of days. The other element that I wanted to talk to, and I'll end on this, and then we can see if there's some questions. I see there's a couple of points maybe here in the chat. But one of the things, because we actually store the data in AWS and store it in a way that we take responsibility for managing the economics. I mentioned earlier, there's a significant cost difference between the cost of snapshots and the cost of standard S3 buckets. What you're seeing here is the cost advantage that we can offer our customers based on just comparison to the cost of AWS snapshots. The net of it is, and again, through the shared responsibility model, snapshots are a very useful tool. They have their purpose particularly for operational recovery, but for data recovery and long-term retention, there's more technology that's required to pull off a cost-effective solution, and that is specifically from a data protection point of view, what Clumio is really built to be able to do. And you see here that particularly not only in the first year with a 42% cost reduction, you see the details of the comparison, but that cost savings grows over time. So with that, I'm going to hit the end of my time, and I want to say thank you to everybody. I'm Steve at Clumio.com. If you have further questions, if there are any questions right now, I'm happy to take them, and I'm going to take a look here.
Hey, Steve,
the chat window.
Yes. Yeah, this is Ron Gerber. We've got to move on, but just to summarize what you're showing there is AWS S3, lots of great usage for all their cloud-based storage. When organizations need to look at their storage requirements, they may not need to have all the features and some of the associated cost of traditional S3 storage. And what Clumio can do to complement that is ask organizations to look at their data, look at what needs to be actively accessed, look at what can be archived, and then you could put together an integrated plan that leverages the best of AWS and the best of Clumio in offering an overall cost-effective solution that recognizes what each organization does well.
Right. No, absolutely. I think the other point that I'd make would be to encourage folks to, look at the cost management console, look at your business requirements from a compliance point of view, and look at what you're spending on snapshots. They're usually coming in under the EC2 costs. The bottom line is we can help with that, manage that, and what that can do is free up costs for other value-added services that AWS provides. Again, we thank you for the opportunity. We'd love to talk to you more about how we might be able to help you.